We are Frits Verheij and Frits Bliek, and we are presenting the Universal Smart Energy Framework, in brief, the USEF, to this webinar. But let me first start with my introduction. We'll start with a video to give you a brief introduction to the value of flexibility and especially the value of the Universal Smart Energy Framework. Then we'll give you an insight why DNV is partner in USEF, and after that we'll start with telling you more about the USEF itself. First of all, an introduction to the framework, and then also main characteristics of the framework. Let's first start the video.
Our energy landscape is changing with more possibilities to produce, use and store energy. More smart devices to influence energy usage. More business models. More players. A new market is developing, with more local activity and more up and downloads of energy anywhere in the system. To make this market truly sustainable, green, reliable and affordable, our current energy system needs to change. It was not designed to facilitate more interaction, and soon we'll be reaching the limits of the system. Unless we make smarter use of our infrastructure. Some of our energy use does not have to be time-specific. Choosing to move that usage to periods of less demand provides system flexibility, just like storing or uploading excess energy. That flexible use can help to ease the system, and there's a market for it, provided we unlock it effectively. USEF opens up the market for flexibility. It is a universal, smart energy framework that enables the active market participation of all players, new and traditional, with consumers at its heart. We designed USEF to accelerate the development of a coherent and commercially viable smart energy system. If we all work together, playing by the same rules, we can monetize flexibility to reduce energy costs. We can alleviate grid congestion and improve our balancing capacity. USEF defines market roles, processes and agreements. It specifies data exchange and control features. The framework fits on top of most existing market models, and everyone can easily build on it because it is open for all. Working with one common standard ensures that smart energy products and implementations fit together. That is how USEF sets the conditions for large-scale deployment of smart energy grids across Europe. The end result? A more sustainable, more effective, and thus more profitable use of our energy infrastructure. USEF. One integrated smart energy market, one common standard, one set of specifications and rules. A solid foundation for smart energy futures. Join us. www.usef.energy.
Okay, so that was the introduction on USEF. Why DNV is a partner in the USEF Foundation? Well, first of all, we like to position ourselves. We would like to regard ourselves as a thought leader, and by that being involved in the new developments both in the energy and new energy services. Secondly, we are working on smart energy for more than 10 years already. It started with the first services on smart metering. About 8 years ago, we added some smart grid pilot projects to our service offerings, and today we have a broad range of services that we can add to the system. USEF could be regarded, or is to be regarded, as a next step in this development. At present, we have experts all over the world, so it's US, various countries in Europe, and even in Singapore. And last but not least, we would like to show ourselves as being an initiator of a number of projects. It started with the Power Missing City project, then with the Smart Energy Collective about 5 years ago, and 2 years ago we founded a foundation, or we established a foundation called USEF. What are the key drivers for USEF? Well, actually, it accelerates the integration of renewables. Again, this started with some research and development, as you can see in the picture below. We have been involved really almost as the beginning of the smart energy developments. And today we are really at the forefront of very important and strategic choices to make before we enter into the large-scale implementations. Frits, the floor is yours.
Well, let me start off by asking you a question. How much power is actually generated by renewables today? I was totally amazed that already 33% of our power is generated by renewables today in Europe. 50% of that is coming from wind and solar power. And the target of Europe is to increase that share to 50% in 2030, which means that we have to double the power generation by wind and solar to almost 1/3 of the total power production. And what we need is flexibility. Because we continuously need to balance supply and demand in the system. And we make sure that there is a balance and the system remains stable. My name is Frits Bliek. I'm working for 18 years in the power industry. I joined DNV in 2003. And in 2007, I started the first pilot project called Power Matching City, which demonstrated a full-scale smart energy system. Based on that initiative, I, together with Frits Verheij and Pierre Nabuurs, started an initiative called the Universal Smart Energy Framework, which is the logical follow-up to enable commercial parties to develop solutions like Power Matching City on a scale that we can implement throughout Europe. We have different forms of flexibility. The first one is peak shaving, where we can increase or reduce the load of the system by altering, for example, the power generation of a generation unit. The second form is time shifting. So we shift the load in time so that, for example, a dishwashing machine is started at a later point in time. And then the third form of flexibility actually is a combination of both, where the flex is both applied in amount of power and in time. What you can also observe in the system is that the prosumer gets a new role. He is not only providing flexibility to the system, but he is also providing or also owning the assets to generate power. So in fact, it's not anymore just a consumer, but he is also becoming a prosumer and is going to upload power to the system. The system has to be adapted to include that role and make sure that the consumer or prosumer, as we call it, gets a fair place in the energy system. What we need to do is to develop, I say, one common standard so that we can implement smart energy systems on a large scale. And for that extent, we develop USEF, and I will speak about three things. At first, I will explain how the flexibility value chain looks like. Then secondly, I will look into the framework itself and how that supports flexibility. And then I will hand over to Frits Verheij again, which will explain what the actual offer of the foundation is. Let's look into the flexibility value chain. The first thing that we have to be aware of is that the consumer is providing a rich source of flexibility to the energy system. And the second thing that we need to realize is that there are a number of parties interested in the flexibility that those end users can provide. At first, there are the TSOs that use the flexibility to maintain the system balance. Then secondly, we have the BRPs which use that to optimize their portfolio and try to find the most economic solution to, I'd say, fulfill the needs of their end users. And then thirdly, there are the grid operators that need to manage the capacity in their grids to make sure that there is no overload in the system and there don't no blackouts occur. If we look into the current system, then flexibility is mainly provided by the large-scale producers on the left side of this slide. And actually what we're doing today is that we're going to replace a number of those large-scale power plants by wind and solar power. And it actually has two effects. On one thing, we are reducing the flexibility that's available in the system. And secondly, we're introducing uncontrollable loads like wind and solar power that actually are asking for more flexibility to maintain the system balance. So what we need to do is to enable the flexibility, what we traditionally call the demand side of the system. And if we look at those small-scale consumers, then we cannot, I would say, guarantee the flexibility that they provide. So what we need to do is to aggregate that flexibility and offer that, I would say, as firm capacity to the rest of the market, to, I say, the players that I indicated before. And that, I would say, reduces the risk and ensure that the flexibility is becoming available to each of them. So what we're actually doing is that we're introducing a new market role into the system, which we call the aggregator. And the role of the aggregator is to maximize the flexibility or the value of the flexibility in the system and to make sure that the flexibility comes available to the one who is having the most need for that. So it reduces the system pain for each of them, and by that it's maximizing its value. Within USEF we believe that opening up the market for flexibility enables smarter solutions for energy exchange to the benefit of all in the system. And plus, we believe that in order to create such a market, we need to create one common standard and join forces across roles and boundaries. Let me now zoom into the framework itself. How does USEF support an optimal flexibility market? At first, what we do is that next to, I say, supply and demand of energy, we recognize flexibility in the system. And this flexibility becomes tradable across roles aggregated by the aggregator in the system. And to do that, actually, we are following the existing processes in the market, which starts off by contracting phase, then we move on to planning, then we validate it, we go into the operation phase, and at the end of the process we are going to settle the flexibility that has been traded. Let me zoom into the first step of that process. So actually the aggregator is creating a contract with the prosumers in the system, and he is actually discussing the prices that he's going to pay and the amount of flexibility that the end user can offer. Based on that, he is closing contracts with the other players in the market to deliver that flexibility and ensure that the flexibility can be delivered in a later stage in the process. Based on that, the aggregator is going to create a plan how much load, I would say, he will create on the system. So he's making a forecast of the energy use or production of his end users and is providing that forecast to both the balance responsible party and the DSO in the system. Those two parties are going to validate if that plan is executable. And if there is, I say, a need for flexibility based exactly, for example, on congestion by the grid operator, then the grid operator is going to demand flexibility from the aggregators. So there will be multiple aggregators offering flexibility to the DSO to resolve that congestion in the system. If that's feasible, then they move on to the next step in the process, and they're going to operate, and they're actually executing the plans that had been sent in before. If it's not feasible, then I say the planning and validation phase is executed over and over again until I say the actual moment of a fair plan is being established. Whenever I say a deviation takes place in the operation phase, I say both the balance responsible party and the DSO can still request more flexibility from the aggregator, and it is at the end of the day a continuous process of exchange of flexibility between those parties. Once I say the moment of operation has been passed, we can move on to, I say, the settlement phase. Measurements are read out, and actually the flexibility that has been delivered to each of those parties is being settled between them, and more value is created in the system. And now I hand over back to Frits van Heij.
Thank you very much, Frits. So what has USEF, or actually the USEF Foundation, to offer? Well, first of all, we have developed a set of specifications, designs and implementation guidelines, including guidelines on privacy and security. And it will help you, or help us, our clients, our future partners, that they don't have to start from scratch. There is already quite something available. Secondly, reference implementation has developed last year, which will help you or help our clients in future to implement smart energy, and especially the USEF framework, into their own projects. So again, they don't have to start from scratch, and actually they can already download the full framework from the website from USEF. And last but not least, we have started our first pilot projects in Amsterdam North already last summer. First insights are expected to become available very, very soon, and the second project will start next month. And we are discussing other pilot projects in various countries to start hopefully later this year. And and we did develop this not on our own. We started the partnerships with a number of partners already 5 years ago. And 2 years ago, when we established the USEF Foundation, we joined forces with 7 parties. 2 of them are grid operators, distributed grid operators. These are Alliander and Stedin. One of them is a utility, Essence, being one of the companies of the RWE, well known in Europe. Then we have 2 IT companies, being IBM and ICT. We have a technology provider, ABB, and of course ourselves as one of the initiators of this framework of USEF. Our ambition for USEF is pretty large. We want to be the factor standard for smart energy solutions throughout Europe, and later this year, later also for in other countries. And on the shorter term, we want to have a market share of 25% in at least 5 countries before the end of 2020.